is your partner also taking 100% responsibility for the fulfillment of their own needs? Because if the answer is no on either end of that, most likely the other partner is unconsciously being coaxed into meeting the other partner's needs.
We also want to use the example of that client because financially they were scarce. And what do you do when you're in a relationship when one partner is scarce, whether that be financials, whether that be, they haven't eaten yet, or whether that be the analogy that you use, babe, the H.A.L.T. What do you do in a relationship when one of you or both of you are scarce? How do you stay connected? Conscious couples, business partners, and singles committed to attracting their dream partner. Welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and combined relationship expertise to help you create and consistently cultivate the most magnificent, intimate relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching conscious couples and individuals all over the world, as well as starting and growing a global business together, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals, welcome back to the one and only Conscious Couples podcast. Today for episode 130. Staying connected while your needs are neglected. We rhymed on that one. Speaking of needs being neglected, I am cooked. It is Friday evening. I'm in the middle of a 10-pound and 10-week challenge, and we're going to get into that and how to stay centered while scarce and challenged. Before we jump into this episode, as always, huge shout out and thank you to Next Level Podcast Solutions for producing this show and apparently up to 45 others, even though some are on hold during the summer, which is awesome. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Spreading personal development, personal growth, self-improvement, all the good things, mental health into the world, including Evolve Ventures and Conscious Couples Podcast. So thank you for all that you do. As always, my love, we've done 130 episodes, and it's always been ladies first. What is your intention for today's episode?
Thank you so much, love. This episode is going to be a very interesting episode that I'm excited to get into, and my intention for our listeners today is to really help glean some golden nuggets away from this episode to really help them, per this episode, stay connected while needs are neglected. So many of us are going through different seasons, different chapters in our growth journey, and it is extraordinarily difficult to stay connected amongst all of that. And it is my hope, it is my intention to help our listeners really be able to do that in a meaningful way in their relationships.
So I've said this many, many times before. I have an acronym that helps me stay centered. It's called H.A.L.L.T, H.H.A.L.L.T. And the idea here is when you're in a state that is scarce, you're going to unintentionally hurt those you love. And so the acronym is hungry, horny, angry, lonely, late, or tired. And what I've always said to people is if you're ever any three or more of those, you're in a very scarce state. And imagine you're late, imagine you're exhausted, and imagine that you haven't eaten and you're hungry. You are going to be a grumpy gills or a prickly pear or a slappy octopus or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, or a bear
person.
Because you're in a scarce state. It's very challenging to stay centered while in a scarce state. So the origin story for this episode, we always want to try to connect it to something that we're going through or growing through, or some of our couples that we've coached are going through or growing through. In this case, we have two. The one that I'm growing through right now is I started a 10-pound and 10-week challenge 10 weeks ago. We're coming up on it. This is the last week. And I've lost... As of last time I weighed myself, I was 186.4. So I've lost almost 9 pounds.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's also not awesome because it has made me much more scarce.
Yeah.
So right now, it's Friday night, and I'm essentially going to work out with Emilia after this as dehydrated as possible. And I'm going to dehydrate through the workout, not drink any water, and see if I can weigh in. So Kevin and I, my business partner at Next Level University, we've never missed a podcast episode. And we said, okay, listen, we need to be accountable. We're not going to lose this weight without each other and accountability. Let's do a 10-pound and 10-week challenge. If he needed to weigh in at 170. So he was 180. He needed to weigh in at 170. I was 190, and I needed to weigh in at 180. No, I'm sorry. I was 195. I had to weigh in at 185. I'm 186.4 right now. I think actually lower because last time I weighed myself was a couple days ago. The point that I'm trying to make, though, is dehydrated, tired, spread thin, scarce, not enough nutrition, not enough calories, does not make for a very centered partner. And so Emilia and I have talked in the past. I do bulks and cuts, and I do bodybuilding and all that stuff. And she's said that it's very interesting to see how different you are in a cut versus a bulk. Because in a bulk, you're in a surplus and you have more than enough nutrients. And I'm just a happy duck, for lack of better phrasing. And in a cut, it's definitely more scarce. And so I'm 9 weeks into a 10-pound in 10-week challenge. And if both of us don't weigh in, he already did. He already hit his goal and weighed in. We also have a community of people, by the way, that have done this with us. So thank you, and shout out to all of you if you're listening. But at the end of the day, the point that I'm trying to make is being scarce makes it infinitely more difficult to be centered and to be kind to your partner. And so that's this episode, is staying connected while your needs are neglected.
So with that, I want to kind of start with scarcity. Scarcity 101. One of the things that a lot of people think about when they first hear scarcity is what you just talked about, which is like maybe not food. But the second thing is also money. And money is a big thing when it comes to relationships. And one of the biggest, I would say, top 3, top 5 issues when it comes to relationships. Obviously, the research is always evolving in that. But I do believe last time we checked, it was like it was in the top 3.
It was 2 or 3.
2 or 3, yeah. And so scarcity isn't just when you have a caloric deficit, which is essentially what Alan's speaking to, right? To lose 10 pounds in 10 weeks, he has to maintain a caloric deficit for his body. So what does that actually mean? On the physiological level, he has less resources to be abundant with and to operate his body with. And for those extraordinarily important executive functioning skill sets, like, for example, emotional connectivity, emotional intelligence, empathy, all those things, including intelligent communication that has love at the center point in our relationship, it continues to be extremely challenging, especially when you have less resources to work with. However, this scarcity aspect also is so prevalent when it comes to relationships and the financials. So when someone, for example, is in a relationship and one partner is bringing in more cash flow into the relationship than, let's say, the other partner, the other partner that is making, let's say in this example, less money than their counterpart or the partner, that person is going to be more scarce. And so it's not just on a physiological level that their needs aren't necessarily being met, right, from a caloric standpoint. But when we have a specific number in our bank account, a lot of people psychologically feel that much more abundant. And a lot of people's self-worth and self-esteem is tied directly to essentially what the numbers are in their bank account. And that's very prevalent when it comes to relationships. If the bank account goes low, so does one's ability to connect and be loving with their partner. And so
we had a couple that had that situation.
We had a couple that had that situation. And truth be told, this partner, everyone, I think, is in a chapter when they find us at kind of exploring themselves. And in particular, is the career trajectory that they're on, is that going to fulfill them? And when you kind of look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we'll include a digital asset in the show notes. So for those of you who are visual learners, at the very top, there's self-actualization. And at the very bottom, there is physiological. Self-actualization is one's bigger purpose, right? Why you're in the career that you are. Physiological needs being met is like, did you get enough sleep? Do you have enough calories to operate through the day? And the in-between of that is usually where people are trying to explore themselves in their relationship. Now, we had a couple where the male in this relationship was essentially kind of figuring out who he was. He was learning, this career that he was in wasn't suitable for his relationship, because every single time that he would come home from work, he was exhausted and he would end up falling asleep on the couch. And then when he was woken up by his partner, essentially he was a very grumpy bear and was not kind to his partner. And it was only so many of those where the question there came up: do I really need to be in this type of a career? It doesn't help me stay fulfilled. I'm not really making that great money. And truth be told, I always come home and I'm not kind to my partner. So after so long, this individual eventually changed careers, changed roles, and ended up getting a job that, when we had gotten on the relationship talks coaching call thereafter, we noticed that there was a huge difference when it came to the relationship's connectedness. And truth be told, it was the fact that they had so much more abundance on the financial front that they were actually able to stay connected. So essentially, we want to use not only Alan's example of him being physiologically deprived of calories, his example, but we also want to use the example of that client, because financially they were scarce. And what do you do when you're in a relationship when one partner is scarce, whether that be financials, whether that be, they haven't eaten yet, or whether that be the analogy that you use, babe, the H.A.L.T. What do you do in a relationship when one of you or both of you are scarce? How do you stay connected? That's where the crux of this lies.
And the idea underneath this too is, if your relationship is only going to work when you're both abundant and fulfilled, well, you're in some serious trouble, and you better not have big goals. Because Emilia and I, we playfully joke, and that's why she just laughed right there. I actually think achieving goals is easy. I think being in love and achieving goals is really difficult.
Absolutely.
And I told Emilia in our relationship, ever since we first got together 5 years ago, I don't want to be at the top of the mountain not in love. And AKA, I want to achieve my fitness goals, and I want to achieve my business goals, and I want to help you do the same, but not if it's going to disconnect us.
Not at the expense of the relationship.
Not at the expense of the relationship. It isn't worth it, right? And so how do you do that? If all you are doing is just always being fulfilled and always having your needs met and always being an overflowing cup, you're basically not challenging yourself, and you're kind of going to get stuck and complacent.
And that'll catch up to you.
And that will catch up to you. It will. But if all you're ever doing is super scarce, spending money you don't have, debt, not eating enough calories, doing these fitness shows or whatever it is, in my case, just a 10-pound and 10-week challenge, while spreading yourself super thin and never being an overflowing cup, then you're on the other side of that spectrum. And both of those are a little bit dangerous. And so I'm a business coach, and I always try to use this metaphor. Businesses grow or businesses fail for two main reasons. They're either not growing fast enough, they don't have enough clients and customers, or they grow too fast and they can't handle it. And it's kind of the same deal. Your relationship is either too much, too abundant, too complacent, too much abundance creates lack of humility, and it all can come crashing down. Honeymoon phase, we've been there. Spend money you don't have, drink more than you should, spend more time with each other than you should, go on these trips, and you can't sustain that. Where do you go from there?
Right.
Or over scarcity because you don't have enough money, you don't have enough...
Penny pinching, couponing all the time.
Exactly, that kind of thing. And so that's what this episode is about. So everyone check in if you're out there watching or listening. Where are you in terms of your needs being met? Are you abundant? 10 out of 10 would be abundance. And you're just overflowing with calories, you're overflowing with finances, you're overflowing with fulfillment. 0 is you're scarce, you're struggling, you're uncertain, your needs aren't being met, that kind of thing. And then do the same for your partner as well.
Hi everybody, I'm Caleb, and this is my beautiful wife Angela. We're pretty new clients to Al and Emilia and their Conscious Couples Coaching.
Yeah, I think we started back in early 2022, around February, and our relationship has completely shifted in a few short months.
I think one of the biggest takeaways from working with them was our communication, which I believe is an obstacle for most couples. I was talking to Ange in a way that I would understand, but it wouldn't connect to her, which caused some arguments. But Al and Emilia were able to point that out, and now I can talk to her how she's going to understand. She can do the same for me.
Yes, our communication is way better than it's ever been. We've been together for about 6 years now, and as well as just really figuring out what our core values personally are, but as well as what they are in our relationship. So being able to communicate from that space is really valuable. So thank you, Alan and Emilia, for everything you've done and for leading the way.
surefire way, this is essentially we're getting an assessment, right? To understand where your relationship at, you need a micro and a macro assessment tool.
Yeah.
And that's a great aspect in terms of the number scale, because then you guys can kind of start there and communicate.
Can you explain micro and macro?
The micro, for example, is am I Emilia in a expansion or contraction state? Meaning when it comes to
like right now.
Yeah, right now in my day-to-day, in this very moment. And what do I mean by that? If we look at, again, that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, let's look at physiological needs. That literally breaks down, okay, from a calorie standpoint, from a sleep standpoint, and from a financial standpoint, right? Time, energy, money, that's essentially what it boils down to. Am I abundant in that? And am I in an expansion state? Or am I in more contracted? Meaning the other day, literally yesterday, my state, I was at a 77 sleep score. That is so low in terms of my sleep standards. And so my physiological needs were low. I'm also in a caloric deficit. And so that's another low. And then financially, I'm abundant, but my mindset is more scarce than I would like it to be, than I actually am. And so those three things, that micro scale, it's really important for me to know that about myself, because the micro state impacts the macro phase that we're in.
Well, your micro state affects what you do and don't do, say and don't say, think and don't think, feel and don't feel, believe and don't believe.
Exactly.
And I also want to share with our listeners too, just in reference, you have a 94 sleep score. I figured out one of the reasons I don't like when you forget to send me your sleep score is actually I won't know your state.
Because you don't know my micro state.
Exactly. And I need mathematical certainty to keep my state well. Because if I have a 60 and you have a 60 sleep score, we're both going to be in a state that's a little bit needs more snuggles.
We got to be a little bit more delicate in how we handle our communications,
yes,
and more emotionally available, or notice that we don't have emotional availability right at our access. We have another client that actually we go into zones. We have a digital asset that says if we're in zone 0, I need to take care of me. I can't take care of the we. The we, I can't give into the we bubble, because I need to take care of me. And so that's super, super important when it comes to knowing thyself and having a quick check-in moment. And am I personally in a state of expansion or contraction, abundance or scarcity? When you have that gauge, then you go into and ask, okay, is the we in a state of scarcity, or is the we in a state of abundance? And then from there, is this a phase, meaning that state is not just going to stay this way for today, but it's going to likely play out for the next couple of weeks, where actually the we is in a state of scarcity. So I would argue that right now, the we, while you and I are abundant in the self-actualization, the more top of the pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid, we have more scarcity than we're used to. So you and I are in more of a contraction phase right now.
Individually, but on the we, it's actually very strong.
Right.
Which is good and gives me more certainty that I can actually be okay in this scarce state.
Right.
So it gets complex, and I think we are complexifying a bit. So let me pull this back for a second. Okay, so for everyone out there, Emilia and I constantly check in on this. We say, where are you at from 0 to 10?
Yeah.
AKA, what is your micro state in this moment? And when we're done with work, usually around 6 or 7, we'll ask, where are you at? And I can tell usually. So if you're at a 3 and I'm at a 7, I'll drive. I'll lead our workout. I'll do kitchen man and make sure that we have dinner. I'll lead.
Yeah.
Because you just need to be and coast and get into coast mode. And then other times, I need to be in coast mode and vice versa. And then what we plan for that evening and or that weekend is based on who needs to refill their cup more. Now, you get better at this, but you need to make sure that you're checking in with it first. And so step 1, check in with your state. Step 2, ask your partner where they're at. Figure out who is in the lower, less filled cup.
More scarce
state. And then try your best to accommodate that person and try to fulfill them so you can get back to neutral.
I'm going to add a comment on that. The goal here isn't necessarily to fulfill your partner, although that is such a beautiful thing. I just want to proceed with caution around that. And this is the third element that I would actually add in on that dynamic that you and I actually talked about a little bit before this episode.
Personal responsibility.
Yes, it's personal responsibility. So I do think that it's really important to have an awareness of your own state. And then it is your personal responsibility to fulfill and take care of your own needs. can you ask the we bubble that you and your partner kind of pour into over the term of your relationship for some of those resources to fulfill your needs and or assist/support your needs to be fulfilled? Absolutely. A great example of this is when I'm maybe not getting such great sleep, for example. That's a fundamental need. Maybe I'll ask Alan to help me vulnerably, courageously, and humility comes into this, where I'll ask you to help me get a little bit better sleep. That's not putting that responsibility fully on your plate, and it's not me relinquishing.
It's asking for support.
Exactly. It's not me relinquishing my personal responsibility to fulfill my own needs, but it is asking for support, and that's beautiful. So to this end, I think that it's also really important for our listeners to understand where are they at 0 to 10 in taking personal responsibility, not just for their needs, but communicating what they need from their relationship, from their partner, if anything. And that's where a lot of relationships struggle,
Well,
especially men.
You and I have a go-to question, which is, how can I support you?
Yes.
So whenever Emilia is in a tough emotional state, I'll sense that. I'll have to take a step back and not fulfill your needs immediately and immediately go into
it's so easy to do
mode.
that.
It is, and I definitely have that tendency.
Yeah.
But I can ask, how can I support you?
Yes. Best question ever.
It is so important. Okay.
But truth be told, if I wasn't vulnerable, courageous, and humble, what would happen then?
Well, what you would do is, if you did have an ego, you would pretend you were in a great state, pretend you didn't need help, and then kind of want me to chase, and this weird sort of dynamic would happen.
And then eventually, a volcano would erupt.
Yeah, of course.
Explode.
Yeah, of course. So real quick, because we got to wrap this up, and this is getting too complex for one episode, I think.
I like it.
Okay, I know you did. So for anyone out there, there's one thing that I do need to make as clear as humanly possible. Check in with your intuition, all the listeners, viewers. Are you taking 100% personal ownership, responsibility for your own fulfillment, your own cup? And more important question, is your partner also taking 100% responsibility for the fulfillment of their own needs? Because if the answer is no on either end of that, most likely the other partner is unconsciously being coaxed into meeting the other partner's needs. And so I always in the past was guilty of this, where I would take responsibility for my partner's needs and their emotional state way more than I should have.
Right.
And in hindsight, I understand why that is. So that's just really, really important, is 0 to 10. A relationship where each partner is taking 100% responsibility for their own needs and providing support to their partner in tandem with that.
I think, and communicating those needs to the
Yes,
partner
of
so that your partner isn't left guessing how they have to or want to or not fulfill those needs, meet those needs, add support to those needs. I think taking responsibility and communicating those to your partner, that's a scary place that a lot of people find themselves in. But truth be told, getting better at that, and we just got off of a relationship talks coaching call the other day, that this is obviously a skill that hasn't been built in this relationship by one of the partners. And truth be told, the more we can get better at not only taking responsibility for our own needs and fulfilling them, but communicating those to our partner, even when it's challenging, even when we might be embarrassed, even when we might feel insignificant, to use the words that we used in there, demasculated or defeminized.
Here's the danger with that,
stuff.
though. I just want to share the other side of this coin. The danger with that is some people are putting it on their partner to meet their needs, and they're very communicative of what they need.
Right.
But they're not taking personal responsibility.
I agree.
And so both of those you need to kind of wean out of your own garden, so to speak.
Sure.
And that's your responsibility, not ours. And if you want help with that.
But if you do want help.
Yeah, if you do want help
really
with that,
with
we would love to sit down with you, either alone and or with you and your partner for free. The Relationship Talks link for coaching will be in the show notes. And coaching is not only going to help you grow together, not apart, but it's also going to help you achieve your individual and collective goals as a couple.
It's awesome. We just got off one this past week, and we had an absolute blast with a couple.
Shout out to you two.
Shout out to you
who
guys
you are
if you're listening. Yeah. And so with that being said, in the show notes will be your invite to our next Relationship Talks event. This will be event all about uncovering and aligning your love languages. One of the things that we hear from our listeners is honestly how amazing the 25 conscious love languages worksheet has been for them. So we're doing an entire event around that worksheet so that you and your partner can grow together, not apart. And this is like an insurance plan to be able to do that and get all the cheat codes. And truth be told, all of our listeners, you guys are evolving, you guys are growing. And so continuously brushing up on these are so, so important. So that will be August 15th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we cannot wait to see you there.
And on our last Relationship Talks coaching session with a listener, they pulled up the worksheet with all of it filled out. It was a really cool moment. So you know who you are. Thank you for that. And we always love to see that. Okay. Thank you again, as always, for listening. We appreciate you. And as always, it's not about you or me. It's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please make sure you follow us on Instagram. I am at Evolve with Emilia, and Alan is a Lazaros 88.
Also, if you or your partner resonated with this episode, leave us a review at the link in the show notes, and please share this with someone you love and care about.
Until next time, remember, it's not about you or me. It's about
the we.